Leading a startup team, whether you're delivering a sugar rush, stocking coffee, or getting a regular delivery of snacks, Office Depot has solutions that fit every startup culture, from getting those first business cards and stationery to ordering fleece pullovers with your new logo. To learn how Office Depot and the California Technology Council have partnered to bring you savings on all of these startup essentials and more, go to californiatechnology.org/member benefits. I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. The Campaign for Sustainable RX Pricing, a coalition of healthcare stakeholders, thinks the rising cost of prescription drugs can be addressed through a series of market-based solutions that will strike a balance between preserving innovation and ensuring affordability. Its recently released plan outlines steps to increase transparency, competition, and value. We spoke to John Rother, Executive Director of the Campaign for Sustainable RX Pricing, about the organization, its focus on market-based solutions, and what it'll take to make them a reality. John, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
We're going to discuss the Campaign for Sustainable RX Pricing and your recent proposal for change to address the rising cost of prescription drugs. Let's start with what's been happening. What have we seen in terms of the rise in drug prices? Is it across the board or concentrated in certain types of drugs?
Well, we've seen a lot of activity in almost every sector of pharmaceuticals. The ones that are getting the attention because of their eye-popping prices are the biologics and specialty drugs that address cancer and other forms of personalized medicine. The prices on those are upwards of $100,000 for a course of treatment. But we've actually seen increases in older drugs as well, almost entirely across the board kinds of increases. For example, Pfizer raised almost its entire catalog of drug prices by between 5 and 20% earlier this year, even for drugs that have been around for years, and there's no additional research or additional value involved. And finally, we've also seen some instances of big spikes in the generic industry, which we think of as lower cost. But when you get to a point where there's only one manufacturer, sometimes that manufacturer tries to generate revenue simply by raising the price. And that's what led to the $5,000 increase on a very old drug that Turing Pharmaceuticals put forth, and it's also the controversy around Valiant. So there's different aspects of this, but the common thread is that prices in general are out of control and are driving higher healthcare costs for everyone.
Is there something that's been driving the rise in prices, or has it just been a variety of reasons?
Well, I think it's really two or three things. Certainly, the new technology involved in biologic drugs and some of the specialty drugs is inherently more expensive. But the increases among older drugs seems to be simply a matter of the drug companies trying to appeal to Wall Street more than to their patients or to their customers. And, we have been pushing back pretty hard on some of those because, again, there's no particular value justification for those kinds of increases. And, of course, the generics oftentimes are been characterized as abusive, where you have these very large price increases on older drugs. So, yeah, each one's different.
You've characterize the solutions you've proposed as market-based. Why are you advocating market-based solutions as opposed to, say, price controls or other government action that would regulate pricing?
Well, we may actually have to get to that at some point, but I think in the United States, we typically want to first see if we can make a market work. And in this case, I think a market could work. It has worked in the past, and we've put forward some ideas that can, in our belief, restore market. Ideas around greater transparency, around more and faster competition, and finally paying for value, uh, setting the drug's price according to how well it works. And I think with those, we could actually get back to a functioning competitive market.
Well, let's walk through those three elements. Let's start with transparency. What do you mean by transparency, and how do you envision that being implemented?
Well, today, we really don't know what the basis is for a company that sets a price on a drug. Uh, what's the comparative value of that drug compared to other existing drugs? What's the likely benefit to the population? What are the savings to the healthcare system from adoption of a new drug? So that's the kind of information that we need to make a more informed, rational decision about the worth of a drug and about its appropriate price.
How about competition? What do you mean in that regard, and what would you do to increase that?
Well, there's several things, but the most obvious is to bring down the backlog of approvals now approaching 5,000 applications at FDA, mostly for generics. But the fact is that we have a lot of potential competition that's simply in, uh, blocked from entering the market by bureaucratic delays and resource delays at FDA. So that's the simplest, most straightforward thing that we need to do. Uh, the other thing we could do to help true competition is to re-examine how much is spent on marketing. Drug companies spend quite a bit more on marketing, especially direct-to-consumer advertising, than they spend on research and development. And that's part of the reason why drugs are so much more expensive in the U.S. than they are in other countries, because other countries do not permit that kind of marketing. So we think we ought to re-examine the balance between how much is spent on marketing versus how much is spent on developing new drugs.
There's been an ongoing battle with the industry and the Obama administration, which on several occasions has unsuccessfully tried to reduce the period of exclusivity for new drugs. Is that on your agenda?
Yes, it is. My members believe that the extended exclusivity period is anti-competitive and was an error in policy. And although it's not going to be something that can be turned around very quickly, we do think that that's worth re-examining because we believe in a competitive market, and extended exclusivity is extended monopoly protection, which is inherently anti-competitive.
Do you see anything being done to accelerate or increase the viability of biosimilars as a competitive source in the market?
Well, that's a very promising development that's just now starting to come into the marketplace. So we certainly want to encourage that. We have not proposed changes other than shortening the period of exclusivity. We do want to see greater attention at the FDA to moving those into the marketplace as quickly as possible.
The third major component you call for is value. How do you measure value, and who measures it?
Well, right now, that's an open question. I think the best example of measurement is being done by a group in Boston, the Institute for Clinical and Economic Research, ICER. And they do a very sophisticated job of assessing the value of pharmaceuticals. So basically, in my mind, it's trying to measure what drugs work, how well they work, and how well they work compared to other uh, either other drugs or other medical procedures. So it is a complex issue. It's not a simple approach, but I think it's absolutely crucial, and it's the direction the entire healthcare system is moving. Paying for value instead of paying for volume, instead of um, just going with whatever price the manufacturer sets.
Is there a way to leverage the data that's being gathered by providers in real world settings to somehow discern value better than we're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. We can now look at people who take certain medications versus people who don't with the same diagnosis, follow them for years, and make a determination about how well the new drugs work or don't work compared to other approaches. And I think this is going to be a very important set of information, data, to help determine value.
So these are big issues, and they require a lot of data analysis, and with that comes expense. What do you see as the biggest barriers to implementing these?
Well, I don't think we're in denial about how serious these barriers are. Certainly, a big barrier is the resistance of the pharmaceutical industry to change. And we want to engage in serious conversations with the industry about how to promote these ideas in a way that preserves the incentives for research and development, preserves innovation, preserves the bringing to market of new drugs that have real potential to cure disease. So I think that there's an opportunity there that we haven't yet experienced. So let's work together. Beyond that, as you mentioned, there are conceptual barriers and financial barriers. Who actually does a comparative effectiveness work? How does that get applied to setting prices? Our belief is that is heavily more flexible if it's done in the private sector. Government traditionally takes longer and is more cautious, and perhaps with good reason. But in this arena, we'd like to see some changes go forward that are negotiated between purchasers and sellers, as is true of the rest of the economy.
We can certainly debate the true cost of drug development. I think most people, though, would agree it's expensive and risky. How do you balance affordability with innovation, particularly when the new drug development is so dependent on attracting investment?
Well, certainly we recognize that, and again, want to preserve and promote it. But again, the industry spends a whole lot more on TV ads than they do on research and development. So I think there's plenty of room to see changes without touching the resources available for new drug development. We understand, of course, that it is risky. We understand that it needs to be able to attract capital. But I do believe that we can achieve a much better balance between innovation and affordability through the kinds of ideas that I've been discussing.
What's the path forward is for the campaign? You've released your proposal. What now? Is there a dialogue with policymakers and industry? How do you get them to sit down at the table with you?
Well, we've already been in dialogue with policymakers, every presidential candidate, for example, and leaders within the Congress, and that certainly will continue as we prepare for a new administration and a new Congress next year. What I hope we will also see is serious discussions with the industry itself, because I really do believe that they have to recognize the current course is unsustainable. It's simply not affordable to continue current setup, and I think that they can be very constructive with the right set of incentives and motivations. And I do believe that the industry has a stake in avoiding the most severe kinds of remedies, such as government price setting, which may be necessary in the end if we don't see some change in openness to a more market-based solution.
John Rother, Executive Director of the Campaign for Sustainable RX Pricing. John, thanks so much for your time today.
It's my pleasure, Danny. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send an email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.